My name is Chapman, and I just turned 67 last month. Life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. After 8 years of silence, not a single invitation to family gatherings, my doorbell rang this morning. There stood Amanda, my daughter, and Thomas, her husband, staring at my new $1.5 million beach house with shocked expressions. When I greeted them calmly, their faces turned pale with desperation. Before I tell you what happened next, if you're watching this from your own peaceful sanctuary after leaving toxic people behind, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding success after family betrayal. The road that led to this moment began long ago. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Connecticut, the son of a school teacher and a hardware store owner. My parents instilled in me the values of hard work and perseverance, qualities that would serve me well throughout my life. I always had a passion for design, spending hours sketching buildings and structures as a child. This passion eventually led me to pursue architecture as a career. I met Catherine during my second year of architecture school. She was studying literature, with dreams of becoming a professor. We were young, ambitious, and deeply in love. Within a year, we were married. And shortly after, Catherine became pregnant with Amanda. Those were challenging but beautiful times. I worked construction jobs during the day, attended classes in the evening, and studied late into the night. Catherine waitressed part-time while finishing her degree. We struggled financially, but we were happy. Amanda was born on a rainy April morning, and the moment I held her in my arms, I knew I would do anything for her. She was a bright child, curious about everything, with Catherine's blue eyes and my stubborn determination. Despite our busy schedules, I made sure to be present for every milestone in Amanda's life. Her first steps, first words, first day of school. I built her a treehouse in our small backyard when she was 8, designed specifically to ignite her imagination. As Amanda grew, so did my career. After graduation, I joined a small architectural firm, working my way up from junior draftsman to project manager. The hours were long, but I always made time for family dinners and weekend outings. Amanda and I had a special bond. Every Sunday morning, we would have breakfast together at a local diner, just the two of us, talking about her dreams and my projects. Everything changed when Amanda turned 17. I had been working late, taking on additional projects to save for her college education. One night, I came home earlier than expected and found Catherine with her literature department colleague. The affair had apparently been going on for months. The divorce that followed was bitter and painful. Catherine portrayed me as a workaholic who had neglected our family, conveniently omitting her infidelity from the narrative she shared with friends and family. Despite the court awarding joint custody, Catherine did everything in her power to limit my time with Amanda. She scheduled mother-daughter activities during my visitation weekends and planned vacations during holidays we were supposed to spend together. Slowly, I watched as the close relationship I had built with my daughter began to fracture under the weight of Catherine's manipulations. Nevertheless, I remained dedicated to being part of Amanda's life. I attended her high school graduation, sitting far from Catherine and her new boyfriend. I helped move her into her college dorm, despite Catherine's insistence that it wasn't necessary. I sent care packages, called regularly, and visited whenever Amanda would allow it. But with each passing year, I could feel her slipping away, adopting Catherine's revisionist version of our family history. During this difficult period, I threw myself into my work. Architecture became both my escape and my salvation. I developed a reputation for innovative, client-focused designs, which led to promotions and better opportunities. The financial stability allowed me to continue supporting Amanda through college and beyond, even though our emotional connection was deteriorating. 5 years after my divorce from Catherine, I met Laura at a charity fundraiser. She was vibrant, independent, and seemed to understand my commitment to both my career and my daughter. For the first time since the divorce, I felt hopeful about building a new chapter in my life. We married after a year of dating, and initially, Laura was supportive of my relationship with Amanda, even trying to bridge the gap that had formed between us. However, as time passed, Laura grew increasingly resentful of my dedication to both work and Amanda. She complained that I was never fully present, always either thinking about a project or worrying about my daughter. The arguments became more frequent, the silences more prolonged. After 3 years of marriage, Laura and I separated. The second divorce was less acrimonious but equally devastating. At 55, I found myself alone, emotionally exhausted, and financially drained from supporting 2 households and paying for 2 divorces. Despite everything, I never stopped trying to maintain a connection with Amanda. I sent birthday and Christmas gifts, called on holidays, and always made myself available whenever she needed me. But as the years passed, her calls became less frequent, her responses more perfunctory. The distance between us seemed to grow with each passing day, a chasm I didn't know how to bridge. Amanda was 29 when she met Thomas at a corporate event. She had followed in neither of her parents' footsteps, instead pursuing a career in marketing. Thomas was 31, working as a finance manager for a real estate development company. From the photos Amanda shared during our increasingly rare phone calls, he was tall and conventionally handsome, with an air of confidence that bordered on arrogance. When Amanda finally introduced us over dinner at an upscale restaurant Thomas had selected, my initial instincts raised some concerns. Thomas ordered the most expensive wine on the menu without looking at the price, spoke extensively about his latest luxury car purchase, and subtly guided the conversation toward my career success and financial standing. Throughout the evening, I noticed how he dominated conversations, often speaking for Amanda or dismissing her opinions with a patronizing smile. Still, I kept my reservations to myself, not wanting to create more distance between my daughter and me. 6 months later, Amanda called to announce their engagement. She sounded happy, if somewhat breathless, as she described Thomas's elaborate proposal at an exclusive resort in Maui. When she mentioned they were planning the wedding for the following summer at a vineyard estate that typically booked 2 years in advance, I offered my congratulations along with a gentle reminder about my financial situation after 2 divorces and approaching retirement age. Amanda assured me they weren't expecting anything extravagant, just my presence and perhaps some help with smaller expenses. Relieved, I promised to contribute what I could and looked forward to being part of her special day. A week later, I received an email from Thomas with a detailed breakdown of wedding costs and a highlighted figure representing my expected contribution. The amount was more than 3 times what I had anticipated and would require liquidating a significant portion of my retirement savings. When I called Amanda to discuss more reasonable options, I discovered that Catherine had already poisoned the well. My ex-wife had apparently told Amanda that I was being typically stingy and unwilling to make sacrifices for my only daughter's happiness. Thomas had reinforced this narrative, suggesting that my architectural career must have left me with substantial savings that I was simply unwilling to share. During that painful phone call, Amanda accused me of not loving her enough to give her the wedding she deserved. "Mom was right about you all along," she said, her voice cold with disappointment. "You've always put yourself first." The words cut deep, especially given the sacrifices I had made throughout her life. Nevertheless, I liquidated some investments and sent what I could afford, approximately 1/3 of what they had requested. The wedding itself was an exercise in barely disguised hostility. I was seated at a table far from the main party, with distant acquaintances who barely knew the bride or groom. Catherine and her 3rd husband occupied prominent positions near the head table, while I watched from the periphery as my daughter danced and celebrated. During his toast, Thomas made several thinly veiled references to some people who hadn't properly invested in the couple's future, garnering knowing laughter from guests who had undoubtedly heard Catherine's version of events. After the wedding, the distance between Amanda and me grew even wider. My phone calls went unanswered. My text messages received delayed, one-word responses. I sent gifts for birthdays and anniversaries that were acknowledged with brief, formal thank you notes that felt like they had been written out of obligation rather than gratitude. The first major family event I realized I had been excluded from was Thanksgiving, approximately 6 months after the wedding. I had called Amanda to discuss holiday plans, only to have her awkwardly explain that they were already committed to spending the day with Thomas's family. I accepted this with grace, suggesting Christmas as an alternative. She hesitated before saying they would try to fit something in around their other obligations. When Christmas came and went without an invitation or even a phone call, I began to understand that this was not a scheduling conflict, but a deliberate choice. The following spring, I was browsing social media when I came across photos from Catherine's birthday celebration. There was Amanda, smiling beside her mother and Thomas, along with extended family members and friends. The caption mentioned a wonderful family reunion, making it clear that I was the only family member not included. Scrolling further through Amanda's posts, I discovered numerous gatherings I had never been informed of. Baby showers for cousins, anniversary parties, summer barbecues, and holiday celebrations. In each photo, Thomas stood close to Catherine, both of them seemingly united in their exclusion of me from family events. For a while, I continued to reach out, sending cards, leaving voicemails, and making attempts to reconnect. Amanda's responses grew increasingly infrequent and impersonal, until finally, during a brief phone call on my birthday, she suggested that perhaps we should take a break from trying to maintain contact. Thomas thinks it might be healthier for everyone, she explained, not quite meeting my eyes through the video call. Just until things settled down, that break extended into months, then years. I was not invited to family Christmases, Thanksgivings, or Easter gatherings. When Thomas and Amanda bought their first house, I learned about it through a mutual acquaintance. When they hosted housewarming parties and backyard barbecues, my invitation was conspicuously absent. Through occasional updates from old friends who still kept in touch with Catherine's side of the family, I learned that Amanda and Thomas had positioned themselves as the de facto organizers of family events, subtly ensuring that I remained excluded from each one. 8 years passed in this manner. 8 years of sending gifts that received no acknowledgement, leaving voicemails that went unreturned, and watching through the digital window of social media as my only child built a life that had no place for me. The pain never fully subsided, but over time, I learned to live with it, to build a life structured around its absence rather than its resolution. The years following my exclusion from Amanda's life were initially dark ones. At 60, I found myself alone in a modest condominium, my social circle having shrunk along with my family connections. The architecture firm where I had worked for over 2 decades was undergoing restructuring, and younger, more digitally savvy architects were being promoted, while veterans like myself were gently encouraged to consider retirement. My health, which I had always taken for granted, began to show the strain of emotional stress through elevated blood pressure and disrupted sleep. For several months, I merely went through the motions of living. I would wake up, go to work, come home to an empty apartment, microwave a frozen dinner, watch television without really seeing it, and go to bed. Weekends stretched before me like empty deserts, 48 hours to fill with nothing and no one. I considered getting a dog for companionship, but couldn't bring myself to commit to caring for another living being when I barely had the energy to care for myself. The turning point came unexpectedly on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was having coffee at a local shop when someone called my name. Looking up, I saw Jack Morgan, a classmate from architecture school whom I hadn't seen in nearly 30 years. Jack had taken a different path after graduation, specializing in custom residential projects rather than the commercial work that had been my focus. We spent hours catching up, and by the end of our conversation, Jack had proposed something that would change the trajectory of my life. "I'm swamped with client requests for beach houses along the Gulf Coast," he explained. "Wealthy retirees and vacation home buyers want something unique, sustainable, and suited to coastal living. Your technical expertise combined with your eye for integrating structures with natural environments would be perfect for these projects. Would you consider coming on as a partner in my firm?" At first, I hesitated. Starting a new professional venture at 60 seemed risky, possibly foolish, but the alternative was continued stagnation, watching my skills and spirit atrophy as I aged into irrelevance. After a week of consideration, I accepted Jack's offer, relocating to Florida and investing most of my remaining savings into the partnership. The learning curve was steep. Jack's firm used advanced design software I had to master quickly. The coastal architectural codes and hurricane-resistant building techniques required intensive study. Client expectations for luxury features demanded I familiarize myself with high-end materials and innovative building systems I hadn't previously worked with. For the first 6 months, I worked 14-hour days, studying late into the night and shadowing the firm's experienced designers during the day. Gradually, something unexpected began to happen. The immersion in creative work reignited a passion for design I had forgotten I possessed. My years of technical experience allowed me to solve structural challenges that had stymied younger architects. My maturity and calm demeanor reassured wealthy clients who were investing millions in their dream homes. Within a year, I had designed my first complete beach residence, a 4,000-square-foot sustainable luxury home that harmonized with its natural surroundings while incorporating cutting-edge energy efficiency. The clients were delighted, and word spread. Soon I was managing multiple projects, developing a signature style that combined barefoot luxury with environmental consciousness. I created homes with expansive views and natural ventilation, using local materials and innovative water conservation systems. My designs featured indoor-outdoor living spaces that blurred the boundaries between architecture and landscape, creating sanctuaries that felt both opulent and organic. As my professional life flourished, my personal life began to heal as well. Jack introduced me to his circle of friends, many of them creative professionals who had reinvented themselves later in life. I joined a sailing club, rediscovering my love for the water that had been dormant since childhood summers spent on Lake Michigan. I took cooking classes, learning to prepare nutritious meals that supported my improving health. For the first time in years, I was sleeping through the night and waking with purpose. At Jack's suggestion, I also began working with a therapist, Dr. Elaine Ferris, who specialized in family estrangement issues. Our weekly sessions helped me process the grief of losing my relationship with Amanda and the anger I felt toward Thomas and Catherine for their roles in that loss. Dr. Ferris introduced me to mindfulness practices that allowed me to acknowledge painful emotions without being consumed by them. Most importantly, she helped me recognize that my worth was not dependent on Amanda's acceptance or rejection. You cannot control whether your daughter chooses to have you in her life, Dr. Ferris told me during one pivotal session. But you can control whether you allow that choice to define your happiness and your future. Your capacity for joy, creativity, and connection exists independently of her decisions. Those words became a touchstone for me, a truth I returned to whenever memories of Amanda threatened to pull me back into despair. I began to understand that letting go was not the same as giving up. I could release my expectations for reconciliation while keeping the door open should Amanda ever choose to walk through it. As my 65th birthday approached, I realized I had accumulated substantial savings through my partnership with Jack. Our firm had grown to include 15 architects, with a waiting list of clients eager for our coastal designs. My personal portfolio included 20 completed luxury homes, several of which had been featured in architectural publications. After decades of financial struggle and setback, I found myself in a position to consider investments I had never thought possible. One evening, while walking along a stretch of relatively undeveloped beachfront, I came across a for sale sign on a parcel of land with stunning sunset views. The lot was larger than most in the area, with natural dunes and mature palm trees creating privacy from neighboring properties. Standing there with the warm sand between my toes and the Gulf breeze on my face, I had a moment of perfect clarity. This was where I would build my own home, a place that embodied everything I had learned about creating harmony between human habitation and natural beauty. I purchased the land the following week and spent 6 months designing every aspect of what would become my sanctuary. I incorporated all the sustainable features I had refined in client projects. Solar panels integrated seamlessly into the roofline, rainwater collection systems hidden within architectural elements, natural cooling through strategic cross-ventilation. The house would have 3 bedrooms, my primary suite and 2 guest rooms that I acknowledged might never host the family members I had designed them for. Construction took 14 months, during which I visited the site daily, collaborating closely with craftspeople to ensure every detail met my vision. I selected each material personally, from the reclaimed heart pine floors to the local limestone accents. The kitchen was designed for someone who actually cooks, with professional-grade appliances and a layout that made preparation a pleasure rather than a chore. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed views of the Gulf, while deep overhangs protected the interior from direct sunlight. The day I moved into my completed home was surreal. At 67, I had created the most beautiful space I had ever inhabited, a $1.5 million testament to resilience and reinvention. As I sat on the deck that first evening, watching the sun sink into the Gulf of Mexico, I felt a profound sense of peace. The house represented not just financial success but emotional sovereignty. I had built a life that was rich and meaningful, even without the family connections I had once considered essential to happiness. That night, I slept more soundly than I had in years, lulled by the rhythm of waves against the shore and the knowledge that I was exactly where I was meant to be. I had no way of knowing that this hard-won serenity was about to be disrupted by an unexpected knock at my door. My morning routine had become one of my greatest pleasures. I would wake naturally with the sunrise, brew a pot of dark roast coffee, and take my first cup out to the eastern deck to watch the day begin. This particular Thursday started no differently. The October air was crisp but not cold, carrying the clean scent of salt water and the distant fragrance of jasmine from the native plantings I had incorporated into the landscape design. Pelicans glided low over the water, occasionally plunging for fish with remarkable precision. I had just returned to the kitchen for a second cup of coffee when the doorbell rang. This was unusual in itself. My home was set back from the road, accessible via a private drive with a discreet security gate. The few friends who visited typically called first, and deliveries were rare this far from town. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, reluctant to interrupt the peaceful flow of my morning. But curiosity won out, and I made my way through the open living area to the front entrance. When I opened the heavy wooden door, time seemed to compress and expand simultaneously. Standing on my doorstep were two people I hadn't seen in 8 years. Amanda, now 42, and Thomas, 44. Amanda's hair was shorter than I remembered, styled in an expensive-looking bob that framed a face more angular than the rounded features of her youth. Thomas had gained weight around his middle, his once athletic frame now suggesting a sedentary lifestyle of office work and business dinners. Both were dressed in casual but obviously designer clothes that looked somehow out of place against the natural setting of my coastal home. What struck me most, however, were their expressions. As they took in the soaring ceiling of the entryway visible behind me, the custom staircase with its floating treads, and the glimpse of ocean visible through the great room windows, their faces registered a complex mixture of shock, envy, and something else I couldn't immediately identify. When I greeted them with a calm, "Good morning, this is a surprise," their expressions shifted into what I now recognized as barely concealed desperation. "Dad," Amanda said, the word sounding strange after years of disuse. "You look, well." Her eyes darted past me again, taking in details of the house with poorly disguised assessment. "Chapman," Thomas said with forced heartiness, extending his hand. "It's been too long. What an incredible place you have here." I shook his hand briefly, noting the dampness of his palm. "Thank you. Would you like to come in?" I stepped back, holding the door open wider without any outward sign of the emotional turbulence their appearance had triggered. Years of business negotiations had taught me the value of a neutral demeanor. They stepped into the foyer with the tentative movements of people entering a museum, afraid to touch anything. I led them through to the kitchen, where the coffee was still hot. "Can I offer you something? Coffee? Water?" My voice sounded normal to my ears, as if unexpected visits from estranged family members were a regular occurrence. "Coffee would be great," Amanda said, settling onto one of the bar stools at the kitchen island. "This place is not what I expected." Thomas remained standing, moving to the wall of windows facing the Gulf. "The view alone must have cost a fortune. You've certainly landed on your feet." I busied myself with pouring coffee, using the moment to gather my thoughts. The last communication I'd had with Amanda had been a perfunctory birthday text 3 years ago. No explanation had ever been offered for the systematic exclusion from family events. No acknowledgement of the 8-year silence. Yet here they were, in my kitchen, making small talk as if we had seen each other last month. I placed mugs before them, along with cream and sugar. It's been 8 years, I said simply, deciding that direct address was preferable to prolonging the charade. What brings you to Florida, and how did you find my address? Amanda's fingers tightened around her mug. We've been following your work, Dad. Those articles in Architectural Digest and Coastal Living. When we realized you were living in Florida, we thought, well, we've been meaning to reconnect for a while now. The lie was transparent. My work had been featured in those publications 2 and 3 years ago, respectively. If they had been meaning to reconnect, they'd had ample opportunity before today. It was actually my idea, Thomas interjected, returning to the island. I said to Amanda, we should take a trip down to Florida. Surprise your dad. Family is so important, after all. I took a sip of my coffee, letting the silence stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable. 8 years is a long time between family visits. I've missed quite a few events. From what I could see, holiday gatherings, birthday celebrations. I believe there was even a family reunion last summer in Catherine's backyard. Amanda had the grace to look embarrassed. Things got complicated, Dad. After the wedding, with Thomas's job and then the house, we just got caught up in everything. Everything except sending an occasional invitation, I noted, keeping my tone mild despite the years of hurt behind the words. But you're here now. I'm curious to know why. Thomas cleared his throat, exchanging a quick glance with Amanda. Well, as I said, family is important, and we've been thinking that it's time to put the past behind us. Start fresh. I nodded slowly, noting how neither of them had actually answered my question. Start fresh. I see. And what prompted this desire for a fresh start? Specifically this week. The atmosphere in the kitchen grew tense. Amanda stirred her coffee with unnecessary vigor, while Thomas suddenly became very interested in the craftsmanship of the cabinetry. I waited, a skill I had perfected over decades of client meetings. People rarely tolerate silence well. Given enough time, they will fill it, often with the very information they had been trying to withhold. Dad, Amanda finally said, her voice softer now. A lot has happened in 8 years. I know we haven't been in touch, and that's largely my fault. I let other people influence my perception of you, and I regret that. It was a practice speech, likely rehearsed in the car before their arrival. What interested me was not the apology itself, but what it was designed to precede. Thomas placed his hand on Amanda's shoulder in what appeared to be a supportive gesture, but which I interpreted as a signal to get to the point. The truth is, he said, taking over. We've been going through some changes lately, and we've been reevaluating what matters most. Family connections, support systems, that sort of thing. I set down my mug and looked directly at both of them. Why don't we sit in the living room? It's more comfortable, and it sounds like we have quite a bit to discuss. I led them to the great room, where comfortable seating was arranged to maximize the ocean view. Amanda and Thomas sat together on the sofa while I took a chair opposite them. The morning light illuminated their faces clearly, and I could see strain in the tight lines around Amanda's eyes and the defensive set of Thomas's jaw. Now, I said, once we were settled, why don't you tell me why you're really here? After 8 years without a phone call, email, or Christmas card, I doubt this is a simple social call to reconnect. Amanda looked to Thomas, who gave her a slight nod. She took a deep breath and began speaking, but even then, I could tell she was circling the true purpose of their visit, delaying the moment of revelation as long as possible. I listened patiently, waiting for the real story to emerge from beneath the pleasantries and vague references to family bonds. Whatever had brought them to my door after all this time, it was clearly something they found difficult to articulate directly. Dad, Amanda finally said, her composure beginning to crack. We need to talk about something important, something that affects all of us. And there it was, the opening to what they had really come for. I leaned forward slightly, bracing myself for whatever revelation was about to follow. 8 years of silence had ended not with a reconciliation but with a need, and I was about to discover exactly what that need entailed. Amanda fidgeted with the hem of her blouse, her eyes darting between my face and the floor. The confidence she had always projected, even as a child, seemed to have deserted her. After several false starts, Thomas straightened his shoulders and took control of the conversation, his finance manager persona asserting itself. Chapman, The truth is, we're in a bit of a situation. His voice had the practiced smoothness of someone accustomed to discussing difficult financial matters with clients. I was with Coastal Investments for 9 years, as you might remember. Senior portfolio manager. On track for partnership. I nodded, though in fact I had known very little about Thomas's career beyond what Amanda had mentioned during our infrequent communications before the estrangement. He seemed to take my nod as encouragement to continue. About 4 months ago, the market took some unexpected turns. I had positioned several major client portfolios in what I believed were strategically aggressive growth opportunities. Thomas paused, apparently weighing how much detail to provide. The investments didn't perform as projected. There were significant losses. Thomas was just being innovative, Amanda interjected, loyalty overriding whatever tensions might exist between them. The firm was too conservative, unwilling to embrace new market approaches. In any case, Thomas continued, with a glance that suggested Amanda's interruption was unwelcome, we parted ways. They called it a mutual separation. But the reality is, they needed a scapegoat for the losses. I kept my expression neutral, though internally I was beginning to see where this conversation was heading. That must have been difficult. 4 months is a significant period of unemployment in your field. Thomas's jaw tightened momentarily. The job market is challenging right now. Several promising opportunities have fallen through at the last minute. Former colleagues who I thought would provide references have been less supportive than anticipated. What Thomas isn't saying, Amanda added, is that his former boss has been bad-mouthing him to potential employers. It's completely unfair. I turned my attention to Amanda. And how have things been for you? Are you still with the marketing firm? Amanda shifted uncomfortably. I left when we decided to start a family. We thought one of us should be home, at least initially. That was 3 years ago. This was news to me, though not surprising given our lack of contact. You have a child, a daughter, Amanda said, a genuine smile briefly illuminating her face. Sophie. She's with Thomas's parents this weekend. The smile faded as quickly as it had appeared. And, well, I'm pregnant again. Twins, actually. It was unexpected, especially at 42. The doctors are monitoring her closely, Thomas added. It's considered high risk due to her age. I absorbed this information silently. A grandchild I had never met, and 2 more on the way. Children who might have known me as a doting grandfather if circumstances had been different. I pushed aside the grief that threatened to surface, focusing instead on the practical aspects of what they were sharing. Congratulations on the pregnancy, I said, directing the words to Amanda, and I'm sorry I haven't had the chance to meet Sophie. I left unspoken the fact that this was not by my choice. She would love to meet you, Amanda said quickly, perhaps sensing an opening. She's smart and creative. Loves drawing buildings, actually. Maybe she gets that from you. I nodded, then returned to the matter at hand. So Thomas is between positions. You're expecting twins in what I assume is a high-risk pregnancy, and you have a 3-year-old daughter. That certainly sounds challenging. Thomas leaned forward, apparently deciding it was time to get to the point. The truth is, Chapman, we're in a difficult financial position. Without my income, we've been relying on savings, which were already depleted from some investment losses of our own. The mortgage on our house in Greenwich is underwater, since the property values took a hit last year. We've tried everything, Amanda added. Thomas's parents helped initially, but they've reached their limit. They're retired on a fixed income themselves. And Catherine, I asked, curious about my ex-wife's role in all this. Amanda's expression darkened. Mom remarried again 2 years ago. Harold is very particular about finances. He keeps separate accounts and insists that Mom does the same. She's offered emotional support but says Harold won't allow her to provide financial assistance. I see, I said, though the irony of Catherine's situation was not lost on me. The woman who had portrayed me as financially controlling was now with someone who actually restricted her access to resources. Thomas cleared his throat, reclaiming the conversation. We're facing foreclosure within 60 days if we can't make the back payments. The bank has already sent formal notices. And with the pregnancy, Amanda added, her hand moving unconsciously to her still flat stomach, The medical bills are mounting. Our insurance doesn't cover all the specialist appointments I need. I sat back in my chair, the full picture becoming clear. So you came to Florida to ask for financial help. There was a moment of uncomfortable silence before Thomas spoke again. We were hoping for a loan to get us through this rough patch. Just until I secure a new position, which I'm confident will happen soon. There are several promising leads. We wouldn't ask if we weren't desperate, Dad, Amanda said, tears welling in her eyes. We've sold everything we can. Thomas's car, my jewelry. We're down to deciding between mortgage payments and prenatal care. Thomas gestured expansively at the house around us. Obviously, you've done very well for yourself. This place must be worth what? 1.5 million? More? We're only asking for enough to catch up on the mortgage and cover expenses until I'm working again. 70,000 would make all the difference. I raised an eyebrow at the specific figure, which had apparently been calculated before their arrival. 70,000 is a substantial amount. It's just a loan, Thomas insisted. We'll pay it back with interest once I'm on my feet again. Amanda wiped away a tear that had escaped, despite her efforts to maintain composure. Dad, we're not just talking about our comfort here. This is about your grandchildren. Sophie needs stability. And the twins. The stress of our situation isn't good for the pregnancy. It was the first time either of them had explicitly mentioned the leverage they believed my grandchildren provided. The appeal to familial obligation was transparent, especially coming after 8 years of exclusion from family life. Thomas, perhaps sensing my hesitation, pressed forward with another suggestion. Alternatively, we've been thinking that a temporary change of location might help reduce our expenses while I job hunt. This house has plenty of room, from what I can see. 3 bedrooms at least? We could move in temporarily, help with maintenance, maybe even assist with your business. I have extensive financial management experience that could be valuable to your firm. The proposal hung in the air between us. I considered it silently, noting that at no point had either of them acknowledged the pain their years of exclusion had caused or offered a genuine apology for it. Their current predicament was being presented as a justification for renewed connection, but there was no recognition of the relationship that needed repair before practical assistance could be considered. And if I decline? I asked quietly. Amanda's tears flowed freely now. Dad, please, you're our last hope. We have nowhere else to turn. Think about Sophie, about your future grandchildren. They need their grandfather, and right now, they need a secure place to live. Thomas's approach was more direct. I would hope that family would come first, regardless of any past misunderstandings. These are your grandchildren we're talking about. Surely your obligation to them outweighs whatever issues you might have with Amanda or me. The word obligation struck a nerve. Throughout my life, I had met my obligations, often at great personal cost. I had worked multiple jobs to put myself through architecture school, paid alimony and child support promptly despite financial hardship, and attempted to maintain a relationship with Amanda despite systematic exclusion. To have my sense of obligation questioned by someone who had participated in cutting me out of family life for 8 years was deeply ironic. I looked at the 2 people sitting across from me, really looked at them. Behind Amanda's tears and Thomas's confident assertions, I saw not family members seeking reconciliation, but individuals in crisis looking for a solution to their problems. The fact that I happened to be related to one of them seemed almost incidental to their purpose. Had our roles been reversed, I doubted they would have opened their home or wallet to me. The realization brought not anger but clarity. This visit was not about healing family wounds or rebuilding relationships. It was a transaction, pure and simple. And before I could decide whether to engage in that transaction, I needed to understand exactly what had led to the 8 years of silence that preceded it. Before we discuss any financial arrangements, I said, my voice steady despite the emotions churning beneath the surface, I need to understand something. In the past 8 years, there have been roughly 32 major family gatherings that I know of. Thanksgiving and Christmas alone would account for 16. Add in birthdays, summer barbecues, Easter, and various celebrations, and the number is likely higher. I reached for my phone, opened the photo gallery, and began scrolling through images I had saved from social media over the years. Here's Thanksgiving at Catherine's house, 6 years ago. Christmas at your place, the following month. A 4th of July barbecue where it appears the entire extended family was present. Catherine's 60th birthday celebration at that vineyard in Connecticut. I turned the screen toward them, showing a group photo from that event. Everyone is there. Catherine's siblings, her cousins from Chicago, even her former college roommate. Everyone except me. Thomas shifted uncomfortably. Those were complicated situations, Chapman. Family dynamics aren't always straightforward. Actually, I countered, this seems very straightforward. I wasn't invited to a single family event for 8 years. Not one. I'd like to know why. Amanda glanced at Thomas before responding. Dad, after the wedding, things were tense. You and Thomas never really connected, and Mom was still harboring resentments from the divorce. It just seemed easier to keep things separate. Separate, I repeated. So separate that when Sophie was born, I wasn't informed until she was 3 months old, and then only through a mass email that included distant acquaintances. Thomas's expression hardened. Look, the past is the past. We're here now, trying to rebuild bridges. Isn't that what matters? What matters, I said calmly, is honesty. 8 years of exclusion doesn't happen by accident. It was a choice, made repeatedly, by both of you. Fine, Amanda said, a flash of her mother's temper surfacing. You want honesty? The truth is, you weren't around enough when I was growing up. You were always working, always at the office or on a job site. Mom raised me practically single-handedly, and then you had the nerve to act wounded when I naturally grew closer to her. I absorbed the accusation without reacting visibly, though the mischaracterization of my involvement in her childhood stung. I worked 60-hour weeks to ensure you had everything you needed. I never missed a school play, a parent-teacher conference, or a doctor's appointment. I built your treehouse with my own hands, took you fishing every summer, and had breakfast with you every Sunday morning until you were 17. That's not how Mom remembers it, Amanda retorted. No, I don't imagine it is. Catherine has always had a selective memory, especially regarding our marriage. But you were there, Amanda. You lived those years. Deep down, you know I was present, Thomas interjected, his voice taking on an aggressive edge. This is exactly why family gatherings were simpler without you, Chapman. Everything becomes a referendum on who was the better parent, who sacrificed more. Catherine didn't want that negativity around family celebrations, and frankly, neither did we. So the solution was to exclude me entirely? Without discussion, without even the courtesy of an explanation. You abandoned us, Amanda exclaimed, the words bursting out with unexpected force. After the wedding, when you refused to fully support us financially, you made your priorities clear. Family came second to your precious savings. I took a deep breath, maintaining my composure. I offered what I could afford at the time. What you and Thomas requested would have compromised my ability to support myself in retirement. And now look at you, Thomas said, gesturing around at the house, living in luxury while your only daughter faces financial ruin. Clearly, you could have afforded to be more generous back then. This house, I explained patiently, is the result of 7 years of intensive work rebuilding my career after age 60. The success you see now didn't exist when you were planning your wedding. I had no way of knowing I would eventually achieve this level of financial security. Amanda wiped away tears, her expression hardening. That's always been your excuse, hasn't it? I'm doing my best. I can only give what I can afford. Meanwhile, Mom and her husbands managed to provide actual, substantial help whenever we needed it. Until now, I pointed out gently, which is why you're sitting in my living room after 8 years of silence. The observation hung in the air between us. Thomas was the first to recover, shifting tactics with the agility of someone accustomed to negotiating difficult deals. Look, Chapman, we all have regrets about how things have played out. The important thing now is moving forward. As Amanda's father and Sophie's grandfather, you have certain family obligations that transcend past disagreements. There was that word again, obligations. As if our relationship could be reduced to a series of transactional duties. devoid of the genuine connection that should underpin family bonds. "Let me be clear about something," I said, leaning forward slightly. "I have always been willing to be Amanda's father and Sophie's grandfather. What I was never given was the opportunity. You can't exclude someone from your life for 8 years and then invoke family obligations when it's convenient. So you're refusing to help," Thomas concluded, his tone suggesting he had expected as much all along. "I didn't say that. What I'm saying is that financial assistance and family relationships are separate issues. If you're genuinely interested in rebuilding our relationship, that requires honesty, accountability, and time. It can't be rushed or forced because you happen to need money right now." Amanda stood abruptly, pacing toward the windows. "This is unbelievable. Your own daughter comes to you in need, and you lecture her about relationship building. What kind of father does that? The kind who has spent 8 years sending birthday gifts that received no acknowledgement, leaving voicemails that went unreturned, and watching his only child's life unfold through social media. Because he wasn't allowed to participate in person," I replied evenly. "I'm not refusing to help, Amanda. I'm refusing to pretend that our relationship is healthy enough for unconditional financial support without addressing the underlying issues." Thomas stood as well, placing his hand on Amanda's shoulder in what appeared to be a comforting gesture, but which I recognized as a signal to let him handle the situation. "What Amanda means is that the timing is urgent. We can work on relationship issues over time, but our financial situation requires immediate action. Perhaps we could discuss a solution that addresses both concerns." "Such as?" I asked. "As I mentioned earlier, we could temporarily relocate here. You have the space, and it would give us all a chance to reconnect while solving our immediate housing crisis. Sophie could get to know her grandfather, and you could be involved in Amanda's pregnancy journey. Meanwhile, I could continue my job search from here, possibly even leveraging your business connections in the area." The suggestion was presented as a win-win scenario, but I could see the impracticality immediately. My home, while spacious, was designed as a peaceful retreat, not a family dwelling. The quiet spaces where I worked and thought would be filled with the chaos of a 3-year-old and, eventually, newborn twins. More importantly, the fundamental issues in our relationship would remain unaddressed, merely papered over by proximity and necessity. "Alternatively," Thomas continued, perhaps sensing my hesitation, "you could consider helping us keep our current home. The $70,000 would clear the immediate crisis, and we could develop a payment plan once my employment situation improves. In the meantime, we could schedule regular visits, video calls with Sophie, that sort of thing." I noted that both proposals primarily addressed their financial needs, with relationship rebuilding presented as a secondary benefit. Neither acknowledged the hurt caused by years of exclusion or offered a genuine path to healing those wounds. "There's another option you haven't mentioned," I said. "Selling your house in Greenwich, which is apparently underwater anyway, and downsizing to something more aligned with your current financial reality. Many families adjust their living situations during periods of financial strain." Thomas's expression darkened. "Our home is in an excellent school district. Sophie has friends there. Amanda has her support network. Starting over somewhere else would be deeply disruptive." "More disruptive than moving to Florida?" I asked mildly. "That would be temporary," Thomas insisted. "Once I secure a new position, we would return to Connecticut." Amanda rejoined the conversation, her tone desperate. "Dad, please. We're not asking you to solve all our problems forever. Just help us through this crisis. For Sophie's sake, for the twins. I understand you're in a difficult situation," I acknowledged. "And I'm willing to help, but not in the ways you've proposed. Both options you've suggested would create unhealthy dynamics and potentially enable financial decisions that led to the current crisis in the first place." Thomas's patience visibly snapped. "So, that's it? You're going to let your grandchildren become homeless because of some perceived slight from the past? What kind of man does that make you?" "Thomas," Amanda cautioned, perhaps recognizing that antagonism was unlikely to achieve their goals. I remained calm, refusing to be provoked. "I didn't say I wouldn't help. I said I wouldn't help in the ways you've proposed. There are other options we can discuss, but they would require genuine commitment to rebuilding our relationship and addressing the financial issues responsibly. "What exactly are you offering?" Thomas asked, his tone skeptical. I considered my response carefully, aware that whatever I proposed would set the tone for any future relationship with Amanda and my grandchildren. I needed to establish clear boundaries while still extending a genuine offer of assistance. After 8 years of exclusion, I wasn't prepared to simply open my home or bank account without addressing the underlying issues that had led to our estrangement. Whatever help I offered needed to support not just their immediate needs but the long-term health of our family relationship. "Here's what I'm prepared to offer," I said, looking directly at Amanda rather than Thomas. "First, I'll connect you with a financial advisor I trust, someone who specializes in helping families navigate serious debt and housing issues. She can help you explore all your options, including loan modifications, debt consolidation, or possibly a short sale of the house with forgiveness of the remaining mortgage balance." Thomas scoffed. "We don't need financial advice. We need actual financial assistance," I continued as if he hadn't spoken. "Second, I'm willing to provide a one-time gift of $15,000 to cover immediate expenses while you work with the advisor to develop a sustainable plan. This isn't a loan with expectations of repayment. It's a gift to ensure my grandchildren's well-being during this transition period." Amanda's expression revealed conflicting emotions, hope at the mention of financial help warring with disappointment at the amount, which was significantly less than they had requested. "Third, I would like to establish a college fund for Sophie and the twins, with regular contributions that will grow over time. This money would be specifically for their education and unavailable for other purposes." "That doesn't solve our immediate housing crisis," Thomas pointed out bluntly. "Finally," I said, still addressing Amanda, "I want to rebuild our relationship, but that requires honesty and effort from both sides. I propose we begin with weekly video calls that include Sophie, so I can get to know my granddaughter. Once the twins arrive and everyone is healthy, I would welcome visits, either here or in Connecticut, depending on your situation at that time." There was a moment of silence as they absorbed my offer. It was clear from their expressions that it fell far short of their expectations, particularly regarding immediate financial relief. $15,000 barely covers 2 months of our mortgage," Thomas said dismissively. "And what good is a college fund to children who don't have a stable home now?" Amanda placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Dad, I appreciate the thought behind your offer, but we need more substantial help right now. The situation is truly desperate." "I understand that," I replied gently. "But throwing money at a problem without addressing its root causes rarely leads to lasting solutions. The financial advisor can help you develop a realistic plan based on your current circumstances, not on the expectation of a large cash influx." "This is insulting," Thomas declared, standing abruptly. "We came to you in good faith, reaching out after years of separation, and you respond with token assistance and lectures about financial responsibility." "Thomas," Amanda cautioned, but he was too agitated to heed her. "No, Amanda, I'm not going to pretend this is acceptable. Your father is sitting in a multi-million-dollar beach house while effectively telling his own daughter and grandchildren to fend for themselves. After everything you've done for him over the years." The last sentence caught my attention. "What exactly has Amanda done for me over the years, Thomas?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. "She's your daughter," he said, as if that explained everything. "Yes, she is," I agreed. "And for 8 years, she chose not to include me in her life. No calls, no visits, no invitations to family events. Now you appear on my doorstep needing substantial financial help, and I'm expected to provide it without question because of family ties that you both chose to ignore until they became useful." Amanda stood as well, tears streaming down her face. "This isn't about the past, Dad. It's about Sophie and the twins. They're innocent in all this." "They are," I acknowledged. "Which is why I'm offering help that addresses their long-term well-being rather than just writing a check that temporarily delays the inevitable. If your financial situation is as precarious as you've described, $70,000 would only postpone the problem, not solve it." Thomas gathered his jacket, his expression thunderous. "We're wasting our time here, Amanda. Your father has made his position clear. Please reconsider," Amanda pleaded, even as she collected her purse. "We don't have anywhere else to turn." I remained seated, maintaining my composure despite the emotional turmoil beneath the surface. My offer stands. The financial advisor, the $15,000 gift, the college fund, and regular communication to rebuild our relationship. I believe that's a reasonable and responsible way for me to help. Reasonable? Thomas spat the word. There's nothing reasonable about abandoning family in their time of need. Keep your insulting offer. We'll find another way. He stormed toward the door, Amanda following more slowly, her shoulders slumped in defeat. At the threshold, she turned back, her expression a mixture of desperation and resentment. I hope you're satisfied with your decision, Dad. I hope your principles keep you warm at night while your grandchildren suffer. The door closed behind them with a finality that echoed through the house. I remained in my chair, listening to the sound of their rental car starting and then fading as they drove away. The ocean view that had brought me such peace earlier now seemed vast and empty, a reminder of the familial connections that remained broken despite my willingness to rebuild them on healthier terms. The days that followed were difficult. I second-guessed my decision, wondering if I should have simply given them what they asked for, if only for the sake of the children involved. But deeper reflection always led me back to the same conclusion. Enabling financial irresponsibility would ultimately harm rather than help my grandchildren, and accepting a relationship predicated on financial need rather than genuine connection would poison any chance at authentic reconciliation. I had not expected to hear from them again, at least not until their other options had been exhausted. So when my doorbell rang 6 days later, I was surprised to find Amanda standing alone on my doorstep, her expression subdued but determined. "May I come in?" she asked. None of the previous visits' artificial warmth in her voice. Just me this time. I stepped aside, allowing her to enter. We settled in the living room, the same spaces we had occupied during the previous conversation, but the atmosphere was entirely different. Without Thomas present, Amanda seemed smaller somehow, but also more authentic. "Thomas doesn't know I'm here," she said after declining my offer of coffee. "We had a huge fight after we left last week. He wanted to try approaching his former boss again, eating crow to see if he could get his job back. I suggested we should consider your offer, at least the financial advisor part. Things escalated. I listened without interrupting, sensing she needed to speak without judgment or commentary. He said some things about you, about me, about our marriage." She twisted the wedding ring on her finger absently. It made me think about patterns, about how I've allowed myself to be influenced by strong personalities all my life. First Mom, then Thomas. "That's a difficult realization," I acknowledged. "The thing is, Dad, I started remembering things from before the divorce. Sunday breakfasts at that diner you loved, the treehouse you built me, how you taught me to ride a bike in that empty school parking lot on weekends." Her voice caught. "Mom always said you were absent, too busy with work to be a real father. But that's not what I actually remember when I really think about it." I remained silent, allowing her the space to continue her thought process. "After you left last week, Thomas and I stayed at a hotel in town. I couldn't sleep, so I started looking through old photos on my phone. Found some from before everything fell apart." She pulled out her phone, scrolling to a particular image before handing it to me. "Remember this?" The photo showed a much younger me, holding a fishing rod beside a lake. 12-year-old Amanda proudly displaying a modest sunfish on her own line. We were both sunburned and grinning widely, the bond between us evident in our matching expressions of triumph. "Loon Lake," I said softly. "Summer vacation when you were 12. You caught 7 fish that day, more than I did." Amanda nodded, taking the phone back. I started thinking about how many memories like that I have. Memories that don't match the story I've been telling myself about our relationship. And then I thought about Sophie, about what she knows of her grandfather. Nothing. Because I've allowed other people to define that relationship for her, just like I allowed them to redefine my memories of you. She took a deep breath. "I'm not saying everything was perfect, or that you never made mistakes, but neither did I, especially over these past 8 years. Thank you for saying that," I said simply. "It means a great deal to hear you acknowledge that. I'm not here to ask for money again," she clarified quickly. "Though our situation hasn't improved, I'm here because I realized I owe you an apology, a real one, not the rehearsed version from last week. I'm sorry, Dad, for excluding you, for allowing others to influence how I treated you, for showing up after 8 years because we needed something that wasn't fair or right. The apology, unexpected and apparently genuine, loosened something that had been tightly wound within me for years. Thank you, Amanda. I accept your apology. I also wanted to tell you that I'm considering your offer. Not the money part, at least not yet, but the financial advisor. If you're still willing to make that connection, I'd like to speak with them. Thomas doesn't agree, but this isn't just his decision to make. Of course, I said. I'll make the introduction today. Linda Everett is her name. She's helped several of my colleagues through difficult financial transitions. Amanda nodded, relief evident in her expression. Thank you. And the other part of your offer, about video calls with Sophie, I'd like that too. She should know her grandfather, the real you, not some story she's been told by others. We spent the next hour talking more openly than we had in years, perhaps ever. Amanda shared details about Sophie's personality, her interests and quirks. She spoke about the pregnancy, her hopes and fears for the twins. I listened, asked questions, and gradually felt the first tentative threads of a renewed connection forming between us. Before she left, I asked about Thomas and their marriage, careful not to sound judgmental but genuinely concerned about her well-being. It's complicated, she admitted. This financial situation has put enormous strain on us. Thomas isn't a bad person, Dad. He's just proud and scared. We both are. But regardless of what happens with our marriage, I want you to be part of Sophie's life, part of the twins' lives when they arrive. I want that too, I assured her. In the months that followed, things progressed slowly but steadily. Amanda worked with Linda Everett to develop a financial recovery plan, which ultimately included selling their house in Greenwich and relocating to a more affordable community nearby. Thomas eventually found employment, though at a significantly lower salary than his previous position, requiring further adjustments to their lifestyle expectations. Our weekly video calls became a fixture in both our lives. Sophie, initially shy with the grandfather she knew only from photographs, gradually warmed to me, especially when she discovered our shared interest in building and design. I sent her simple architectural drawing tools and taught her basic techniques during our calls, delighted by her natural aptitude and curiosity. 6 months after their initial visit, I flew to Connecticut to meet my grandchildren in person. The twins, Alexander and Grace, were barely a month old, tiny but healthy despite the high-risk pregnancy. Holding them for the first time, I experienced a surge of emotion that transcended the painful history between their mother and me. These new lives represented possibility, a chance to build relationships uncomplicated by past grievances. The visit wasn't without tension. Thomas remained distant, civil but cool in his interactions with me. The financial advisor had apparently recommended several courses of action that conflicted with his vision for their future, creating ongoing friction between him and Amanda. Whether their marriage would weather these challenges remained uncertain, but I was determined to remain a steady presence for my grandchildren regardless of the outcome. Over time, I've come to realize that family relationships, like architectural structures, require both strong foundations and regular maintenance. The foundation of my relationship with Amanda had been damaged but not destroyed, allowing us to rebuild something new on the remaining solid ground. The maintenance now involves regular communication, honesty, and mutual respect for boundaries, elements that were missing during the years of estrangement. I've also learned that true forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or pretending harm wasn't done. It means acknowledging the reality of past injuries while choosing not to let them determine future interactions. Amanda excluded me from family life for 8 years, influenced by others but ultimately responsible for her own choices. I can forgive that exclusion without minimizing its impact or setting myself up for similar treatment in the future. Perhaps most importantly, I've discovered that peace doesn't come from escaping difficult relationships, but from changing how we participate in them. By establishing clear boundaries, communicating honestly about expectations, and prioritizing connection over transaction, I've found a way to be present in my daughters' and grandchildren's lives, without compromising my own well-being or dignity. As I write this from my beach house, where Amanda and the children are visiting for the summer, I can hear Sophie's laughter as she builds a sandcastle at the water's edge. The twins are napping in the nursery I created in one of the guest rooms, and Amanda is reading peacefully on the deck. Thomas remained in Connecticut, citing work obligations but likely also avoiding the discomfort of an extended stay in my home. Our healing journey continues, with progress and occasional setbacks. Family gatherings still carry undercurrents of past tensions, but they exist now, which is more than I could have said 2 years ago. I'm grateful for this second chance at connection, even as I maintain the boundaries that protect my hard-won peace and self-respect. If you've stayed with me through this story, perhaps you've recognized elements of your own family dynamics, your own experiences with estrangement or reconciliation. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members you love? How did you balance compassion with self-protection? If you found value in my journey, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about navigating complex family relationships in our later years. And remember, it's never too late to rebuild connections on healthier terms, to find peace not through escape but through transformation. Thank you for listening, and may you find wisdom and strength for your own family journey.